The cafeteria was always loud, but that Friday afternoon it was louder than usual, the kind of noise that echoed off the pale green walls and made every conversation feel like it was happening inside a tin can. Trays clattered, sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor, and somewhere in the corner a group of juniors erupted into laughter over some inside joke. The air smelled of pizza grease and chocolate milk, that strange combination only a school cafeteria could produce. Jason sat at the table near the vending machines, surrounded by his usual crew, Tyler, Nick, and Jordan, the self-proclaimed kings of sophomore year. They weren't cruel, not in the serious way bullies in movies were, but they loved a good laugh, especially when it came at someone else's expense. Jason was the ringleader. He had that effortless kind of popularity, the confidence that made people want to follow him, even when they knew he was trouble. His charm was a mask, and he wore it well. It was Tyler who noticed the new kid first. "Hey, check it out," he said, nodding toward the far table by the windows. "New guy's eating alone again." Jason followed his gaze. There, sitting perfectly straight with a tray neatly arranged, sandwich, apple, carton of milk, napkin folded precisely in half, was Malcolm. He had been at school for about 2 weeks, long enough for rumors to start. Some said he'd transferred from a fancy private academy. Others said his parents were professors somewhere. Nobody really knew, because Malcolm didn't talk much. He carried around math textbooks thick enough to use as doorstops, wore wire-framed glasses, and always seemed to be doing something that looked too complicated for anyone their age. "Kid's weird," Nick muttered, leaning back. He didn't even flinch when Coach yelled at him for doing extra problems after class. Jason grinned. "Extra problems? Who even does that?" Jordan snorted. "A nerd, obviously." Jason watched Malcolm for a moment. The kid wasn't doing anything wrong. Just sitting there, eating, quiet. But something about that calmness, the way he didn't seem to care that he was alone, irritated Jason. There was a part of him that didn't like seeing someone so composed when he himself thrived on chaos. It was like Malcolm existed in some different rhythm, untouched by the noise and nonsense around him. Tyler leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Bet you won't mess with him." Jason smirked. "You think I won't?" The challenge hung in the air, electric and stupid. Jason grabbed his milk carton and stood up. His friends watched, half laughing, half holding their breath. Malcolm didn't look up as Jason approached. He was writing something in a notebook, pencil moving in small, careful circles. When Jason stopped in front of him, the shadow fell across the table. Slowly, Malcolm lifted his eyes. They were a deep brown, steady and unreadable. "Hey, new guy," Jason said, forcing a smile. "You look like you could use some company." Malcolm blinked once. "I'm fine, thanks." His voice was calm, polite, but there was a quiet firmness underneath, as if he was used to not needing anyone's approval. Jason hesitated for a second, not expecting that tone. His friends were watching, waiting. He could feel their eyes burning into his back. The pressure to perform kicked in, the need to be funny, to keep his status intact. So he did what he thought would get the biggest laugh. He lifted his milk carton. "You sure you're not thirsty?" Before Malcolm could respond, Jason tilted the carton forward. The milk splashed over Malcolm's head, dripping down his forehead, soaking his collar, and pooling onto his open notebook. The cafeteria went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into laughter. Tyler slapped the table, nearly choking on his fries. Nick doubled over, wheezing. Jason grinned, but only for a second. Because Malcolm didn't shout, he didn't get up or push back or even look embarrassed. He just sat there, blinking slowly as the milk slid down his face. Then he reached for a napkin, wiped his glasses clean, and looked straight at Jason. His expression was unreadable. No anger, no fear, just quiet composure. He looked at Jason like he was studying an equation he already knew the answer to. "You done?" Malcolm asked softly. Jason opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was something unsettling about the way Malcolm spoke, not loud, not emotional, but certain. For a brief second, Jason felt small, like the joke had flipped and he didn't know when. He forced a laugh. "Yeah, man, all good. Just welcoming you to the school." Malcolm said nothing. He simply closed his soaked notebook, stood up, and walked away, milk dripping from his hair. The laughter around Jason continued, but it didn't sound as sweet anymore. For the first time, he couldn't shake the image of those calm, steady eyes, the kind that didn't need to fight back to win. The week after the cafeteria incident dragged by slowly. Word about the milk spill had spread through school like wildfire, and for a while, Jason felt like a celebrity. People clapped him on the back, laughed about it in the hallways, and even a few teachers shook their heads with tired disapproval that only fueled his ego further. But beneath the surface, something about it didn't feel as funny as it used to. Every time he passed Malcolm in the hallway, quiet, composed, moving like the noise of the world didn't touch him, Jason felt an odd twist in his stomach. Guilt, maybe, but he pushed it away. Then, one Monday morning, the math teacher, Mrs. Andrews, strode into class holding a flyer. "Listen up, everyone," she said, adjusting her glasses. "The regional math championship is next month. Our school is sending a representative. Any volunteers?" Predictably, no one raised a hand. A few students snickered. Someone muttered, "Only the nerds care about that stuff." Mrs. Andrews ignored them. "Well," she continued, "since no one's volunteering, I've already selected someone based on test scores and participation. Malcolm Reed will represent our school." Jason felt a ripple move through the room. Heads turned toward Malcolm, who sat near the window, pen poised over his notebook. He didn't look surprised, just nodded slightly and said, "Thank you, ma'am." The class erupted into whispers. Jason caught snippets. "Figures. Who else could it be? He's like a robot." Jason smirked, but his laugh came out hollow. Something about Malcolm's calm acceptance bothered him. The guy didn't even seem to care that the whole class was talking about him. No pride, no embarrassment, just focus. Like the rest of them were background noise. A few days later, Mrs. Andrews announced that the math team, which was really just Malcolm, would compete at the local college auditorium. Students could come watch if they wanted extra credit. Jason hadn't planned to go, but when Tyler and Nick decided to tag along, for entertainment, he found himself agreeing. "Fine," he said, "could use a laugh." The morning of the competition, the air was crisp and cold, sunlight slanting through the trees as the group of students shuffled off the school bus. The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy. Teams from different schools clustered together, kids in matching shirts, clutching calculators and folders, whispering formulas under their breath. Jason had never seen so many people excited about math. He slouched in the back row with Tyler and Nick, already bored. When Malcolm walked onto the stage, the room quieted. He looked small against the backdrop of numbers projected on the screen, his posture straight, his face calm. The moderator explained the rules. 10 rounds of complex problem solving, each more difficult than the last. Jason leaned back, whispering to Tyler, "Watch this, he's gonna choke." He didn't. From the first question, Malcolm moved like he was in another world. His pencil danced across the page, his handwriting fast and clean. Equations sprawled like art. When the moderator called time, Malcolm would lift his head, unhurried, and say, "Done." Every time, the judges exchanged impressed glances. After the third round, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. After the fifth, the other teams started watching him instead of their papers. Jason sat up straighter without realizing it. This wasn't some quiet kid pretending to be smart, this was something else. He wasn't just good at math, he owned it. Jason didn't understand a word of what Malcolm was solving, but he could tell from the judges' faces that it was impressive. He could tell from the other students' nervous fidgeting that they knew they were outmatched. By the final round, the scoreboard showed a clear lead. Malcolm, alone, was ahead of entire teams by double digits. When he finished the last problem, before the timer even hit halfway, the auditorium fell completely silent. Then the head judge cleared his throat and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we've witnessed a perfect score." The room exploded in applause. Students from other schools even stood up. Mrs. Andrews beamed, clapping with tears in her eyes. Tyler muttered, "Holy crap." Jason didn't clap right away. He just watched as Malcolm, still calm as ever, accepted the certificate and shook the judge's hands. He didn't look smug or proud, just quietly satisfied. Like this victory wasn't a surprise to him, just the natural outcome of hard work. When the crowd began to thin, Jason found himself walking down the aisle toward the stage. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was guilt, or curiosity, or the strange need to say something that had been sitting heavy on his chest since the cafeteria. Malcolm was gathering his papers, neatly stacking them in a folder. "Hey," Jason said. His voice came out awkward, quieter than he intended. Malcolm turned. "Hi." Jason shoved his hands in his pockets. "That was, impressive." "Thanks," Malcolm said simply, eyes steady. Jason hesitated, searching for words. "I didn't know you were that smart." Malcolm's mouth quirked into the faintest hint of a smile. "You didn't ask." Jason scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, I guess I didn't." He looked down at the polished floor. "Listen, about last week, the milk thing. I was being an idiot. I'm sorry." For a second, Malcolm studied him, really studied him, the way he might study a complicated problem. Then he nodded once. Apology accepted. Jason exhaled, feeling something loosen inside him. He turned to go, but Malcolm's voice stopped him. "Jason." "Yeah." Malcolm smiled slightly. "Next time, maybe you should sit at my table. I could show you how to actually use a calculator." Jason laughed. "For real this time?" "You got it, genius." And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like laughing at someone. He felt like learning. The bus ride back from the math championship was quiet. Most of the students were asleep, their heads lolling against the windows, while the late afternoon sun flickered through the trees like a strobe light. Jason sat a few rows behind Malcolm, staring at the back of his head, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The cheers, the applause, the look of pride on Mrs. Andrews' face, it all kept replaying in his mind. But what really stuck with him was the calm way Malcolm had handled everything. Like winning wasn't something to celebrate, just something to understand. Jason leaned his head against the cool glass of the window and sighed. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like the loudest person in the room. He didn't feel like the guy everyone followed. He felt small, but in a strangely good way, like he was seeing the world from a different height. When they reached the school parking lot, the sun was already dipping low, painting the asphalt in long shadows. The group scattered quickly, everyone calling goodbyes, buzzing about the victory. Malcolm stayed behind, packing his folder carefully before stepping off the bus. Jason hesitated, then followed. "Hey," Jason called, jogging a few steps to catch up. Malcolm turned, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "Hey." Jason stuffed his hands into his jacket pockets, suddenly nervous. "So, you really aced that thing, huh?" Malcolm shrugged modestly. "It went well." "Went well." Jason laughed. "You basically crushed everyone. Even the judges looked scared." Malcolm chuckled softly, adjusting his glasses. "Math doesn't scare people. People scare themselves when they think they can't do it." Jason fell into step beside him as they crossed the lot. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like a teacher or something." Malcolm smiled. "Only when someone's listening." They reached the sidewalk where the street lamps were flickering to life. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the smell of cut grass and distant traffic. Jason kicked a pebble down the path. "You know," he began quietly, "I've been thinking about that day in the cafeteria." Malcolm stopped walking but didn't say anything. His face was calm, but his eyes softened. Jason swallowed. "It was messed up. What I did. Everyone thought it was funny, but, I don't know. It wasn't. You didn't deserve that." Malcolm tilted his head slightly, as if considering his words carefully before replying. "You're right, I didn't." His voice wasn't harsh, just honest. "But you said sorry. That's more than most people ever do." Jason nodded, relieved but still uneasy. Look, I've been acting like some big shot for a long time. I guess it felt easier to laugh at people than to admit I don't really have anything going on." Malcolm looked at him, the kind of look that saw through excuses without judgment. "You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room," he said quietly. "Just be the one who's willing to learn." That line hit Jason harder than he expected. It wasn't patronizing. It wasn't pity. It was advice, genuine, kind, and solid. The kind of thing a person remembers long after the moment passes. As they walked on, Jason noticed the math folder tucked under Malcolm's arm, edges worn, a corner stained faintly with milk. The irony made him smile. "You kept that notebook." Malcolm glanced down, then back at him. "Yeah, Reminds me that people can surprise you. Jason chuckled. Hopefully in better ways next time. Malcolm laughed softly, and the tension between them eased. The sound was warm, unguarded, the first time Jason had heard him laugh at all. It wasn't forced or quiet, it was real. They stopped at the corner where their paths split, one road leading toward Malcolm's neighborhood, the other toward Jason's. "Hey," Jason said, scratching the back of his neck, "you think you could, help me out sometime?" "With math, I mean." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You want tutoring?" "Yeah, I kinda want to understand how you make all that number stuff look easy." Malcolm smiled, that calm, assured kind of smile. "It's not easy. It's just practice." Jason nodded. "Then I'll practice, if you're willing to teach." Malcolm extended his hand. "Deal." Jason shook it firmly, feeling a strange mix of humility and gratitude. As Malcolm turned to leave, Jason called after him, "Hey, Malcolm." Malcolm looked back. Jason said with a grin, "if you ever want to join a basketball game, I can teach you something too." "Fair trade." Malcolm laughed again. "We'll see, Jason. We'll see." Jason watched him go, feeling something shift quietly inside him, not guilt anymore, but respect. He realized he had met someone who didn't just outsmart him, but outgrew the kind of world Jason used to live in. As the last light of day faded, Jason turned toward home, the sound of Malcolm's words echoing in his mind. "You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, just the one who's willing to learn." For the first time, Jason actually wanted to.